because the thing that is graspable to us is the fact that, oh, I'm a human being. We grasp the process, which separates the beginning and the end. And instead, what everyone's doing is reading the beginning and the end and saying like, oh, but the truth of the matter is that, no, you can't reach the end. But by way of recognizing that you can't reach the end, you reach the end.
Yes.
They're missing the true emtza of Torah Chassidus, which is that it's both and at the same time. And every moment of thinking you've reached the end, you have to, at the very same moment, remember that, no, but I haven't really reached it. It's a love biderech midosav. I'm always, it's a mediated immediacy, meaning I'm never touching the real thing. The moment I touch the real thing, I've made it something real and congealed.
Yeah.
But you know where the problem is also, and this is another symptom, is that the separation between Kabbalah and Chassidus, that people like to quote the Rebbe Rashab on, that Kabbalah is a perush on Chassidus.
Right.
So the misunderstanding of that, along with other general misunderstandings that came out at that same time, like that Atzmus Yisparach is graspable to some degree.
Yeah.
And that only halavai beinani, and I can't be a tzaddik also. These three elements convey the wrong idea of what Chassidus is. That if we cut Kabbalah off from Chassidus, Chassidus becomes something that's very close to Christian theology, God forbid, to the degree that it seems like a closed system that can be completed.
So what? Maybe we take a step back. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? And what do you mean by Atzmus being graspable?
So all of Chassidus is ultimately talking about our relationship with the essence of God.
Right.
But it's about what happens after the essence of God is concealed or undergoes a certain form of tzimtzum. Now, the highest level, the tzimtzum ritzonit, that original dilug, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe termed the tzimtzum hamavhil, the wondrous thing that took place before the beginning of anything, already dictates to us that all we are ever grasping is the essential expressions of godliness. Right. That whenever the tzaddikim are using the lashonos of atzmus, it's always, at least up until, the later generations, it's always with the additional phrasing of shmo ha'atzmi, or ziv ha'atzmi, or ha'atzmi. None of those things are the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu can only be grasped by way of derech hashlilas hashlila, and nimne hanimnos, as the Rambam, as Ramash describes in the Hadronim, that there's no grasping God. Leis machshava tvisa beklal. And even if itvasu beruusa deliba, that doesn't mean you're grasping the essence. That just means you're coming more into an awareness that you can't grasp the essence. The notion of grasping the essence of godliness, grasping, I'm saying, is a very difficult idea to base any type of system around, because what does that mean in terms of the recipient of that information? If I can grasp atzmos, or the notion of atzmos, even the notion of grasping it is impossible to kind of get stuck into. But look, the question is...
Wait, so it's a problem if you can't grasp it, or it's a problem if you can?
If you say that you can, you're being magshim it, and you're turning it into an idol.
So that's a problem.
That's the problem. The problem is that people walk around nowadays thinking that atzmos, or the essence of God, is something that has been revealed and is graspable.
Yeah, they have atzmos on speed dial.
That's the problem. Yeah. Because atzmos only represents a placeholder for that which we cannot grasp. Now, it's very important to note, we're not talking about the presence of God's infinitude or not. That's not what the conversation ever has been. It's about graspability.
No, that the Rabbeim said that the simplest people have a handle on the presence of God. Yes, of atzmos, of the essence of God's presence. They have a handle on Him being present, but not on what it is.
Exactly. And there's been a shift, and what I understand it to be, although I don't know the history well enough, is that the mashpiyim after the 5th generation, and the Rebbe Rashab revealed more than other generations. If you read the frightening words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe about Hemshech Ayin Beis, I mean, he understood that there was something cosmic afoot in the publishing of these writings.
Yes.
And Samach Vav already begins to bring it out.
Yes.
But God forbid, heaven forbid, for us to ever think that the Rebbe Rashab or the Lubavitcher Rebbe Schus Yogan Aleinu was claiming that the Jewish mind can grasp atzmos.
Right.
No matter how far we go, by definition, we have to assume that kedushasi l'mala mikdushasechem. This comes out most explicitly in the Tzemach Tzedek, in countless places, but nobody's learned.
So you feel that if I'm just tracing your idea correctly, you feel that this idea of Kabbalah being a parish on Chassidus, or like the Kabbalistic approach being subservient to Chassidus, allows Chassidus to basically do away with the mysticism.
So good. So this is the second shot of the answer. So that's the problem with Atzmos, right? What does Kabbalah teach us? Especially Kabbalah that's seen through the second iteration of the writings of the Arizal, which is Svardi Kabbalah of Shalom Sharabi, is that it relativizes infinitude. And it ensures that really every level of grasp is deficient in relationship to that which is above it, whole in relationship to that which is below it, and both whole and broken in relationship to itself. We know this from the language of Kabbalah, Gar and Vak, or Atzilus and Bria Yitzir and Asiya, these two perspectives. Now, every level of grasp that I have to be simultaneously aware that there is now a new level of grasp that is above me.
Right.
So it's aliyos ein kates.
Right.
And that even when one were to come to the highest level of Radla, at the end of the day, all that reveals is the Malchus that is above it, the Shmo Ha'atzmi, or Malchus de Ein Sof, as the Arizal brings down. So if I am learning Chassidus without that protective device of erchin, of relativity, that no matter what level of Kesser I grasp, all that is the Malchus of the lower world, ad infinitum, never grasping the essence, because to grasp the essence is heretical.
Right.
Because then either I'm susceptible to the essence or the essence is diminished to my capacity. So what Kabbalah does is it protects the Hagshama Sadavar, because it says even when you get to the top of these phrases, all that means is that you're now transplanting and abstracting the frame back to a level higher and higher and higher. Chassidus without Kabbalah, you just have the proper names, and then you're dealing with terminology and forgetting about the perpetual growth process and the infinite gradations of spiritual growth that must remain in front of the person at every moment.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
You hear the connection?
I do hear the connection. I'll let me throw something at you. Tell me if I'm understanding it. There's this idea that's spoken about in Basi Legani, which is Bizbuz Aitzers, that in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer Basi Legani, which was the last hemshich that he printed before he passed away. It was actually printed on the day that he passed away. And in that hemshich, he speaks about Bizbuz Aitzers, the mashal of the king who's fighting a war, and Netzach is the deepest. And everything goes out the window, and even the things that were hidden are now revealed. Right? He throws all the crown jewels. He throws into the war. He puts all his chips on the table. So the nimshal is that in Aaron Sof there's the Maila Adin Ketz, and that also becomes, that's usually hidden. Right? That's Aaron Sof that's hidden. Helem acher helem, and now it's also revealed
as helem.
Right. So my question was always, what does that mean? Right. It was always here, and now it's revealed as helem. What, like, isn't that a play on words? Like, and how does that fit into the mashal where it's actually put on the field? If I still don't have access to it, so one way that I have of understanding it, and I have no idea if this is correct, but this is how I understand it, is that up to a point, when in times of peace, let's say, when there isn't a war, we operate in a reality where there are things that go that are, there's a civilization, there's a system that is set up, and everyone knows that there's something that's underpinning it. We don't really know what that is or how that works, and that's by design, because it's too much for people to handle. People need to focus on what's at hand, with a sense of security that's provided by something else that's kind of vague and mysterious and hidden. In times of war, we don't have that luxury anymore, and that's what makes war so scary, is that your very foundation is now under threat. And the same thing in the Nimshal is that it feels to me like there was a time where Chassidus is more like you're talking about, where there's a part of Chassidus which is revealed, there's Avodas Hashem which is revealed, and Atzmos is clearly off limits. There's a part of the Godhead, like they like to say, that is completely, that's none of your business. It's there, and it's a foundation. It's the golden Fort Knox, whether it exists or not. That is the fact that you think it exists, or the fact that you know it exists in this case, underpins your entire Avodas Hashem. At some point, at a time of war, you become aware of that as well. You no longer have the luxury of that being hidden. The problem, the risk that you run is, I think, what you're discussing, where you begin to assume, well, if I know about it, that means that I understand it.
Sure. That's exactly right. It's
right. The hidden has become revealed. Right. And no, that's not what it means. It means that the hidden is no longer separate from what's revealed.
It's ha'elem ha'atzmi being revealed, but it's continuing to conceal itself.
Right.
Look, I also have the benefit of having spent a lot of time reading the works of Elliot Wolfson,
right,
Shlita, who really gave me a language very much to understand these terms and conditions. But I think that what gets missed in this is the impact that it has on the psyche of the individual who's hearing these words and witnessing these ideas play out over time. Because if atzmus, let's say, is something that's graspable, so I'm identifying atzmus as perfection. So if I already have in my mind that that's something that's accessible, but I haven't taught about what that accessibility means, then yeah, if we all knew and all of the children knew that hasaga, grasp, really means the grasp of negative grasp, which is by way of negation, you touch it, so then, okay, it wouldn't be such an issue. But because people are hearing these ideas, and very often it's around strong drink, and there's, young men speaking to young men, and it's just kind of this brash encounter with ideas. So these ideas become cheapened, and then it trickles down into the lived experience. So then I'm walking around with this concept of perfection, or the graspability of perfection. Now, if I have a notion of perfection or being able to become perfect or grasp perfection, instead of living with that very clear limit point that is so stressed in every one of the mamrim of chassidus in the previous generations about ha'elem ha'atzmi and leis machshavat tfis ve'klal, then psychologically I'm now drawing into my midos the notion of, well, I could be perfect. Even if I'm not trying to do anything, the language has an impact. And so when I start measuring myself with this foreign thought that I can be perfect because I can grasp perfection, so then I start looking at my symptoms or my behaviors as being no longer in the realm of what I should be doing, and I start covering them over, and I start hiding them, and I start ignoring them, and it leads to all sorts of kind of perfectionist tendencies and addictive tendencies of trying to reach some imagined place of self-perfection, which is inaccessible. The most important thing is nefesh hashvala, is the contrite spirit and the humble spirit and the meriruskite that doesn't come from anything other than by recognizing that I am not God.
I think it's important to note here that you're not just talking theoretically. You're practically. Your work as a therapist. You work with
this
people.
Is the root of all addiction. The root of all addiction is the belief in perfection.
Right.
And the pain that comes from its absence and the failed attempts of recreating it by way of substance or idea.
No, but you've seen people who have suffered as a result of this thought process.
I've seen people who have suffered as a result of this thought process. My exposure to people who have, quote unquote, suffered or been impacted by the reality of Chabad has been this thought process, but as reflected in kind of the cultural dimensions of it. Like second, third generation children of shluchim, let's say, where the notion of this all-imposing force of the Rabbi of Lubavitch and being cogs in a machine and soldiers in an army didn't cross the divide of the numerous traumas that populate what our generation can be called as a post-traumatic generation. And so there was more willingness to step away and more willingness to kind of untether oneself from these demands of what Chabad Chassidus seems to impose and what the language of Atzmus impose and what the direction of which they were related to the Rebbe was. And then what I've seen most potently is that after the Nasira, after the severing, what a person comes back to when they start reading Rav Hillel Paracher's Bir on Shar Yichud.
1 second, for those who don't understand, by Nasira you mean after people basically throw it all away?
Or when one gives themselves permission to step away from what's causing them pain.
Basically, to approach it the way you approached it at first.
To first walk away from it, though.
Right.
A person can't do that. I thank Hashem very often that I was not born into an active Hasidic dynasty, because then I wouldn't be able to be connected to what I believe to be the Hasidus of our generation, which is the unification of all of this Ramim.
Right. No, so I'm saying,
right. So you step away.
You step away.
You free yourself,
not with the intention of coming back, because then it doesn't work. But
you step away because you're no longer afraid of the lightning bolt.
Right.
And then when you realize that there's no lightning bolt coming, then you could say I could step away a little bit more.
Right.
And okay, so gigs up. Nothing's going to happen if I step away.
Right.
But then what does happen is the stepping away leads to alienation from self. And nowadays we have a slew of ways in which people are trying to discover themselves, and some get caught up in that. But more often than cannot, people will then go to a Farbrengen that might not be from an identifiable, Chabad source, and they're talking in the language of the Alter Rebbe or what the Mittler Rebbe is saying, and suddenly it's like, where has this been all my life?
Right.
Where's Rav Hillel Parcher been? Where's Rav Aaron Halevi? Where was the teachings that it's only through my deep sense of selfhood and experience and my deficiency, not in a broken type of way, but from a human type of way, that's where I encounter God the most. And people are thirsty for that.
Right. So it's a human thing that you are stressing here again and again, and it's so important. It's so important, and there's this is a question and a problem that we've come back time and again in this podcast in one way or another, where there are people, for example, who have experienced what you experienced. They walked away either from just Lubavitch, or sometimes they walked away from Yiddishkeit entirely, and that's when they rediscovered a connection on their own terms. And so then the question becomes, what do you want for your children? Do you want your children to go through the same thing? And so it's like, for example, what are your kids gonna do? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like how. In many ways, this was a Lubavitch conundrum from the beginning. They spoke about the Maila of the Gevarna over the Gevarna, those who became as opposed to those who were born. But at the same time, what are you going to do? You're gonna
Mashiach afsil asya tzadikaya b'tiyufta.
Right.
It's one of my favorite ma'amarim from the Mittler Rebbe.
Yeah.
Mashiach comes to restore the truly righteous in tshuva. It's a great question, but the more and more the generation receives its birthright of all of the tzaddikim, even if it's through the particular lens of one tzaddik. I'm very connected to one particular path, but my connection to one particular path enables me to draw in whatever path I so desire. I'm just no longer interested in reading postmodern philosophy or psychoanalytic theory because I don't believe that the neshama of the author is in the book, and it's not going to provide me with the anxiety relief I need. But I think that we live at a time where there's a change underfoot and there's a zeitgeist of spirituality that is drawing forth a collision between what I like to phrase as like the two remaining spiritual options, Chabad and Breslov, which is that my point here is that it's okay to have like this splitness. I grew up in a modern Orthodox community. I didn't become Haredi, but I'm no longer, nor did I ever fundamentally identify with the full doctrine of modern Orthodoxy. Rav Soloveitchik is a bedrock of my thinking, but the bedrock of Rav Soloveitchik's thinking is the Alter Rebbe. So, like you're not, these are not, these are not systems.
Okay, good luck staying pure.
Yeah, that's the meaning. There's a person, someone said to me the other day on a podcast, they said like, for me, Arizal had no impact on my life. I was like, wait, let's just trace whatever realm of Jewish influence you think you have, whether it's Tikkun Olam or whether it's Musar or, the Arizal is playing a pretty significant role in the development of modern Jewish consciousness.
Yeah.
So my point is that to be mixed up.
By the way, any person who reads the Aleph Beis is deeply influenced by Kabbalah.
Exactly.
Right? The shapes of the letters are from the Beis Yosef, who found them in a kuntras called Baruch Shamar Alpha Besa, which are based on Kabbalah.
Yeah, everything. It all comes into Nahar HaYotzim Eden. And I think realizing this, like, what do you think you're talking about? You're talking about mystical Judaism. Right. Chassidus didn't come to reveal something that was novel. It came to reveal that which was always already there, but hidden. So the question of sociologically and community-wise, meaning, my point is that this is also having its impact on culture. Meaning, there's a whole enclave. If you look at the history of modern Orthodoxy of YU in the last 20 years, you do see a pretty profound impact in the world of teachings of Chassidus. Rav Moshe Weinberger Shlitu, I consider my Rabbi to a certain degree, in many degrees, in all degrees, but he is perhaps one of the more successful iterations of drawing the lights of pre-war Chassidus into a post-war modernized perception.
It's so you said it so many times, and it's so interesting to me. Partially because Lubavitch was in Russia, so the Holocaust is more in the periphery in terms of even though the Fiedler was rescued by the Nazis. I don't know if you know the story, by the Nazis out of the Warsaw Ghetto, but that's kind of forgotten or not spoken about. But the populace did not, and the Rebbe was also rescued out of Vichy, France. But Lubavitch as a whole didn't go through the Holocaust.
Forget the Holocaust, the Sugya of Shviras HaKelim. The person doesn't need to know what the Holocaust is. Learn the Sugya of Shviras HaKelim through the writings of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, and you'll see that, it's all formed around the post-traumatic response.
No, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying it's fascinating to me how you bring it up. And in Lubavitch, the whole idea is continuity. Hold on to the past. Hold on to the past. It's just a very interesting tension because, like I think we were speaking off air, like as much as there might be a truth to that you have to hold tight and be very, very devout to these ideas and these traditions. It's clear to me that we haven't come to terms, that the Lubavitchers that I know have not come to terms with the fact that we live in a different reality than our grandparents. Forget even the fact
the Admorim didn't write about Shmiras Habris. It's not present.
Well, they actually,
there's some places where it's addressed.
No, the interesting thing is, from what I understand, is that was the first Yechidus that every Bacher had with the Rebbe Rashab.
Okay. Oh wow!
Right?
I didn't know that.
That's what I've heard, and it was something that was spoken about but not written about. And the Rebbe, I think, was the most emphatic in saying, just don't address it. Just throw yourself into learning. But I'm not proficient enough on the sugya.
No,
but,
me neither.
But there's no question in my mind. I'm not even talking so much in spiritual levels, which are not really my. I don't get to dictate what chassidus should say and shouldn't say. But even I'm talking more cultural levels. Like, we don't live in the times of our grandparents. Like, Lubavitch likes to see the split as before Gimel Tammuz and after Gimel Tammuz, and I argue that the distance between my parents' generation, who were before Gimel Tammuz, and their parents' generation is far, far wider. The distance is far wider over there than between my parents' generation and my generation. Even though Gimel Tammuz happened, right?
Absolutely.
Their parents' generation grew up in a different world, under completely different circumstances.
But the question that you were bringing up before also is that the ideal is not impacted by the real. Meaning, if something is fundamentally true, right, then it's reasonable to say, why should I care about the changing nature of time when I'm holding on to the innermost kernel of that which remains real? And so I think that there's also embedded with this issue, and I understand it, but there's a lack of a cohesive and unified educational model of what Chassidus Chabad is saying. Now, this is not, God forbid, to come and deny the validity of anything that the Rebbe Rashab wrote. But if a person is not reading the Mitler Rebbe, or if a person is not reading Ayin Beis or Samach Vav, or they're not learning Rav Aaron Halevi or Shar HaYichud with Rav Hillel's Biur, I can't imagine how Chassidus can have an impact on a person's day-to-day life, because a person has to realize that Chassidus is talking literally about finding ourselves down here in this place and a deep awareness of every nick and cranny of the spiritual process. And there's always a hyper-emphasis on unity of failing and growth. If a person is not giving themselves the medicine that is in their cupboard already, so then it's not a surprise that a person is going to feel sick and then begin looking elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying. I totally resonate with what you're saying. And I've seen it myself growing up, where this jumping over, like there'll be so many times where people will be like, well, like a specific question in Chassidus about a darga and atzilus, which in many ways is more relatively graspable. Now, that's too complicated. The mimer seems to be like, there's a whole pilpul here, but I'm much more comfortable talking about atzmos and dir b'tachtenim, right. And it's like, dude, something's
the division.
Something's broken here. If you're more comfortable with what isn't graspable over the things.
This is exactly true, because the thing that is graspable to us is the fact that, I'm a human being. We grasp the process, which separates the beginning and the end. And instead, what everyone's doing is reading the beginning and the end and saying But the truth of the matter is that, no, you can't reach the end. But by way of recognizing that you can't reach the end, you reach the end.
Yes.
They're missing the true emtza of Torah Chassidus, which is that it's both and at the same time. And every moment of thinking you've reached the end, you have to, at the very same moment, remember that, no, but I haven't really reached it. It's a love biderech midosav.
Right.
It's a mediated immediacy, meaning I'm never touching the real thing. The moment I touch the real thing, I've made it something real and congealed.
Yeah. I think I once put it that, that there's the pilpul about Malchus of Atzilus is the mom and pop of the economy. Atzmos is like the cash advance bros.
And it has the finance bros. On everything.
And it's like there's the same way that the world basically, what are you going to be? You're going to be a schlepper that makes a few bucks here and there. And it's like, but I like honest labor. I don't want to speculate.
We can't. We're missing the point. And then we're going to get stuck in this notion that Mashiach already came, and we have cousins that do that.
Right.
That's what I mean when we say we become, the other side, to the degree that if you take the perpetual relativism out of it, there's no point on the scale in which we grasp the essence of God. Never, ever. Right. We just stop being able to talk about what it might even mean. Now, is there a notzutzutz of the awareness that it's always ever present? Avada, all of the things that any of the Admorim or the Nesiim wrote is true, but it must be understood in its context.